Hi everyone, and before anybody makes a no more sarcastic comment, I've got a different name on the screen. So everyone in the community knows me as Claire Edgson. That was my name for the best part of 20 years. I got married 18 months ago, so my name for work is my new legal name. So if you see Claire Stubbs on the screen, I am the same crazy person as Claire Edgson. So you haven't slipped into a different dimension, you're still stuck with me. So today we're going to look at a bit about low code and high chaos. But to do that, we're going to explain a few things on the way. Just a quick bit about me for those poor souls that have never had to suffer me before. I work for Capgemini. I'm the European CX CTO for Microsoft Technologies. Everything Power Platform and Biz Apps come to me. And a fast track recognized architect since the very first Power Platform one in 2020. Enterprise architect specializing in security. So I'm the big bad wolf that says no to everything. And that's why I've got the wolf logo on my platform Guardian, because I am always the one going, you want to do what? Why? No. My main thing now is helping coach and mentor other people, both to become speakers, but also to be enterprise architects. So let's look at low code history. We talk about low code like it's something new. It's not. We've been calling things low code for a long time, going right back into the 70s to where we were there playing with things like Infomix and Progress 4GL. I'm not quite old enough to have done it in the workplace for all of it, but some of it. Certainly in the 80s, I was playing with Infomix 4GL. Now, why was it low code? Because it was suddenly a quick way to build. You'll see a pattern in here. Then as we come into 80s and 90s, we had Lotus Notes, Access, yay! No. Oracle Forms, Power Builder. These were the things that we were calling low code back in the 80s. And it was things that let us build quickly and easily. Then we get the joy of Visual Basic. I'm sure most of us wish that thing was never born, but hey, it's made a whole career for people. And HyperCard if you played in the Apple space. So again, this was all about UI, draggy, droppy. Sounding familiar yet? Then as we come into the 2000s, this is where IBM, Appium, Pega really shone because they created the things that were the visual workflows, what were sort of things we'd call the power automators of today. We already had them, and SAP doing a magnificent job of this. Then we get in more into the low code. You guys know today's the Mendic OutSystems, Microsoft Power Apps, all that family. So this stuff's been around a while. If you take a very quick glance at the slide before I move on, to see these themes are very common to what we have today. It was draggy droppy. It was quick to do. It was repeatable. It helped build workflows. Starting to sound familiar? So up on the screen, for those of you who are old enough to care, there's some real gems in there. Those of you who played with Lotus 123 and SuperCalc. So why am I showing you these? Excel and everything in the SuperCalc world, that was the first business user low code. Those kinds of spreadsheets were the first time people could solve their own problems, however awful the products were. And then obviously Visual Basic came out and people started to do macros in their Excel, all the VisiCalc. And then we have the horrible monstrosity that is Access that many of us have lived with. But they were the low code. Now, I'm telling the story for a reason. How did we solve that now? And those of you who are old enough to have been around long enough are probably already chuckling because we know that the spreadsheet chaos still hasn't been solved. We know there's still Access and things like that lurking. And those of you still with Lotus Notes are still crying. So did we actually solve it? No, but it gives us a load of lessons learned for today. Some of the problems we had was everybody wanted their own data, and therefore the data was then spread on everyone's computer. Sometimes they were on floppy disks we gave each other. And don't even get me started on USB drives that nobody could find because that carried this year's accounts on them. These all the big server rooms businesses invested in, the most expensive, ridiculously priced equipment. But the average user didn't know where it was, didn't care, didn't interact with IT. Is this starting to sound a bit familiar? So let's look at the risks we had, because this is going to lead us into where we're going. So the risks of access and all the Excel family was, biggest ones were data leaks, because people put their Excels anywhere and everywhere. Things were not backed up. How many of you have either been in a business or worked with a client where there is a monstrous Excel or something like it that nobody knows how it works? They don't touch it because nobody understands the processes. It's never been documented. We're starting to see some Power Platform monstrosities like that because everyone took their own snip of the data. There were so many different versions of the truth. Decisions were made in isolation because you only had your version of the truth. You couldn't audit the business. I mean, we could try and work out how many Excels and accesses and Lotus Notes there were, but knowing who could see what data when was awful. And from a security person's point of view, it used to take us months and months to audit businesses. And even then, we might not find it all. There was, no matter what IT managers and directors tell me, there was zero control. Because if you had access to a system, you had a means to export it and stick it in an Excel, and worse still, you could connect something like Lotus Notes or access to it and start making apps and automations that nobody could control or see what they were doing. The biggest business risk to that was it was easy for it to get deleted or broken, and it was incredibly hard to then modernize going forwards. But why did the businesses do it? Makers, that we call them now in Power Platform, the business users, the teams, they wanted their own control. They wanted to be able to share it. Nobody wanted to go and ask IT because they'd say no. They wanted to crowdsource the problem. I'll do my bit, then you have my Excel. And and that team, Joe, could you just add that bit in? It turned into monsters. I distinctly remember working with a client that manufactures vehicles, millions of vehicles a year. And up until last year, they were still working on a 500 tab Excel with 50,000 macros on it. Don't even consider the VB that was added on top. Nobody knew what it did, but it was magic. So, not having to keep asking the business for business cases and justify why you needed to solve a problem, it was in their own control. The curious makers, as we'd call them now, the curious people who got really good at Excel or Access, they found their own way. They started to shine. And nobody understands their data like the actual users, particularly if you're talking to finance teams. They didn't want to talk to devs. They didn't want to talk to IT. They knew what they wanted. They just needed the tools to build it. And they didn't necessarily need budget. Does any of this sound familiar to what we hear today with Power Platform and everything around it? So we're still struggling with the business ripping itself in half. So we want to control the data protection. We want access control. We want to just tell them who can build what where. But the business still has this huge desire to solve the problem without bothering IT. They don't understand budgets, or maybe they don't have budgets and they want to just quietly solve their problems themselves. They know their problems change regularly. And if you've ever worked in a business that has to raise business cases, you know that can take 6 months to a year to get approved. My problem's gone and changed in that time. As a business team, as a business leader, I know what I need. Why do I have to go to IT? It's exactly the same as we've had for the last far too many years. Have we really solved this problem? So in today's world, this is some of the problem children. Obviously, Power Platform, which most of you are very familiar with, the Dynamics family, which I always joke is our big, ugly Power Apps on top. But as we start to get into the Copilot world, of all 126, 27 co-pilots we have now, we've got more problems. We've got more problem children than we ever had. It's not just rogue people with Excels and Access. We've given them all these damn tools and they're everywhere. How on earth do we actually start to get control? So it's a real balancing act. We've got to look at the risks and rewards. And this is just highlights. There are hundreds of things I could add to this seesaw. The security person in me is always going to tell you that data loss is your biggest risk. Losing your data or having your data ransomwared, attacked, corrupted, plain idiots with your data is going to be the most expensive accident you ever have. It's going to be more expensive than stopping payroll. If you corrupt large amounts of data, break major enterprise processes by losing or corrupting your data, it will cost more than any licenses you can possibly imagine. And if you have accidentally shared that data to the public area and it's business sensitive, the legal ramifications and suing costs are so astronomical, you might as well go and move to the moon. The other risks when we think low code is the reliability of it, because it depends how it's built. Most of you have, if you don't build Power Platform yourself, you manage it, you care for it, you might hate it, you might love it. You know that depending on how it's put together, it's super reliable or super awful. So there's a reliability issue. If my business is dependent on this process working, so Power Apps, Power Automate, Copilot, it's got to be reliable. And there's some big questions there with low code because there's not necessarily been a quality assessment. Karen in accounts has made it herself. Jim on the shop floor made it himself. Brilliant. But now 50 people are using it, 500 people are using it. It's important. Is it reliable? My age-old argument, Power Platform, amongst many of the other low codes, is disaster recovery. You'll all go, yeah, Microsoft does that for us. Yeah, they do for 7 days. Or if you're lucky, they'll do it for 28 or 30 days. How many of you have been in a business scenario where somebody has deleted something and nobody realizes till more than 28 days? And sometimes people don't know till end of quarter or even end of year, and you have no way to go back. DR in the traditional sense of tapes, backups, or whole things on a server over there. It is one of Power Platform's biggest holes that there isn't a way to do it smartly other than what Microsoft gives us. If you had other products, you might use things like Veeam to back up. So we have got to do it in bits. We can back up the code, we can back up the data. Can we pull it together in less than an hour? No, not in any easy way. So there's some risk in low code, but it's a risk we may be willing to go with. Ownership is the other biggest risk because we've got owners of the big data systems. You know, hopefully somebody is responsible for your Oracle or your SAP or your SQL or even your SharePoint mess. But when we come down to low code, who's responsible for having built this thing? Fred gets promoted, he moves on. Fred's not going to care about the thing he built 3 years ago. Who's responsible? So there is an ownership problem in low code, just as we had with the Excels. People leave, people move, people pass it to others. How do we know who's responsible? Now, if it's just a little thing for me and my buddy, maybe IT doesn't care. But if it's something that more and more and more people depend on, well, God forbid you've let the CFO or the CTO or CIO be responsible and need these things and they're busy. Who's looking after this thing? Then we got general data access. And those of you who've heard me speak before, I'm very passionate about making sure the right people see the right data in the right place. Low code doesn't give people access to things they didn't have before when it's single sign on. But if we build something with a service account, a service principal, an API, maybe a virtual table that's now bringing in the entirety of the sales data for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to see, is that okay? Do we care? Does it matter? The maker doesn't know better. Why should they? But as a business to decide where low code sits, it's often one of the biggest arguments I hear from business is they're not comfortable with this data access part. The rewards are those curious makers, those amazing people who suddenly find their feet in Power Platform, whether it's the Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate. We're seeing some of the most creative, brilliant people pop up and be magical. And they also help their teams grow quick. They become the champions, the devs, the people who show everyone else how to do it. Just like those who sussed how to make Excel brilliant, we're getting that in Power Platform. The local business units, branches, teams, departments, they want their own control. They want independence from IT. It's that perennial battle of I want to do it myself, but no, you can't. Yes, you can. Never underestimate a team's desire to solve their own problems. That brings us into that quick, easy adaptation back to Excel, SuperCalc, Lotus 123. We could solve our own problems. It might be ugly as hell, but we could solve it ourselves. We didn't need to go to IT. So there are hundreds of other pieces in this balancing act, but if you're an admin and security and mean creature like me, I want to hit the risk side. But those of you who are super creative and amazing at what you build, you need the reward side. So this balance of how on earth do we keep the business being super creative, saving time, money, energy, being brilliant at what they do to make them a world-leading client? How do we help that without letting stupid happen? And that's going to be this constant battle. So let's look at governing our people. There's a lot of words on this slide, but I always start off with when we have to govern humans, think about what the word governance means. It's the framework of rules and policies and processes, practices. The biggest things are it makes sure people are accountable, it needs to be transparent, and most importantly, it has to be fair. You can't have one rule for finance and one rule for HR and one rule for everyone else. When I sit with businesses trying to understand the whole governance mess, biggest thing, and again, those of you who heard me speak before, don't panic. Out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I literally have taken my don't panic towel into a meeting and got up. It's on the chair. Don't panic. We can do this. There are ways to help govern. But govern is different from ruling. If I rule you, I tell you what you will do and you will not do. That doesn't make people in the workplace work. You have to govern. You have to think about how people can operate. I can tell you all sorts of rules as a mean, nasty security person. I guarantee you will find a way around it. So let's look at how we govern humans. The risks. We've got to be really honest about the risks. Yeah, he's a new co-pilot. Let's go add things to it. Oh, look, I can build a power up with a new thingy. Look at me go. Fantastic. But, and I train all our young devs to think like this. If I do this, what is the worst anyone can do? We have hackers. We have idiots, our own employees, that do the most stupid things we couldn't even imagine that they'd managed to do. You can also have malicious employees. So if I build this thing What is the worst that can happen? Because we run away with the capability. We forget to think of what can happen. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop you building it, but I want you to tell me how you think we can stop dangerous, stupid, and malicious. There are lots of ways to do this, but I always start with the devs thinking, what is the worst that can happen? I hear the next one, the argument, low code is not the same as pro code. Well, it isn't. And as a IT hacker and do ethical hacking on businesses, they're very different. The tools we employ to break into businesses, whether I steal your email, you stupidly click on something I've sent you, or I'm hammering in from the outside. Pro code and low code are different. Low code is inherently well protected by the mechanism it's created. You look at Power Platform, it's inside its own platform, inside M365, inside Azure. It's almost impossible to smash in from the outside. But what if I get you to click on an email and you unwittingly give me your login? What can I do if I get in as you? And those of you who are IT in your own businesses, how many of you got admin rights as your normal account? Hopefully none. How many of you got service accounts that do every damned environment and app and automate? I have so much fun with you. How many of you have got accounts that the password don't ever change? Again, I'll break it in seconds. So what are the rules? When we look at low code and pro code, we have to consider best practices. If we mix them, we layer on another risk. So ideally, we low code first, pro code as a must have afterwards. So let's think about more about the humans, because we're talking about governing our people. Those of you who are techs, I guarantee the minute people start talking, you're solutioning in your head, because that's how we're wired. As those of you looking to govern the people, you have to listen to the problem first, because sometimes the thing they're trying to solve is not a tech solution. I've seen clients build the most amazing convoluted things just because somebody had to walk to the other end of the corridor to get to the printer. Move the damn printer. Listen to the problems first. The people have to feel like they've got a way to be heard. You are not a dictator. We are not turning into a kingship, a dictatorship. We are here to hear our people, listen to their problems. The next one is one that gets most people riled up. Licenses and capacity cost money. We know that in Power Platform, we have to have enough licenses to get the capacity to build the magic. But your business teams don't understand that. They're able to build things in Excel now. Why do they want to spend money on something? Which brings me to the next one. SharePoint apps and building Power Platform on SharePoint is not the answer, okay? Do you remember I said the risk of data loss is so much more expensive than anything else? This is key. You have to help the business understand why that spend is important, why they need the licenses to be safe, to be magical, to have all the other tools. It's about the story you tell them, not the rule that you enforce. Then we've got to help our admins understand how do I support my people? How do I manage them? How do I monitor them? Because remember, we've got nasty hackers, we've got idiots, and we've got malicious. So how do we stop those from causing trouble and making our low code be shut down? The next biggest thing I always tell businesses is whatever you decide, it's got to be fair. You have to be transparent. You are never going to connect to Twitter or X, whatever it's called this week. That's a rule. But why? It doesn't have to be a deep technical solution. It's We're not going to build connecting to social media because the risk is this. And none of you need to. None of you need to be posting your tech solution on Twitter. You need to be solving it in your business department. So explain, be transparent, but most importantly, be fair. If you let one team do something another team can't, they will find out, and you have lost the trust and the belief that you can govern. The next piece is about educating those makers, about helping them understand. They're not going to want to understand every tiny bit of data loss prevention, but help your makers understand what the security risks could be. Why are we thinking like this? Help them think about the malicious, the stupid, and the hacker. It's maybe too technical at the level we talk about here, but help them think, why wouldn't this not be a good idea? Why do you think we shouldn't put payroll on a public website? What could possibly go wrong? The other side you'll hear from businesses, if they can do it in Excel today, they're going to do it anyway. So if you're trying to govern better and be able to see what they're up to, encourage that into Power Platform. If you say no in Power Platform and they can do it in Excel, guess where they're going to go? You're not going to have solved anything. You're going to have gone back 20, 30 years because you're stopping the business. It's compromise, it's listening, it's finding the fair way forward. And there is no easy path. Every use case will be a battle. Every use case will need different politics. But you cannot rule with that one ring. You will be worked around or pushed out or ignored if you rule as an authoritarian. It has to be a parliament of people. Then we come to the joy of AI. Now, this brings a whole brand new piece to our problems because we've got to add ethics. We've got to add the risk the machine may think for itself. There are new things. The biggest thing when I'm working with business leaders and admins is, oh, there's more stuff. I can barely control what I've got. Why have we got all these extra things? It's the same principle. Don't panic. Let's understand the risks. Now, AI is much harder, it's much newer. The vendors like Microsoft, they're not being truly open and honest about where the big risks are. There are lots of other lovely white papers. Those of you who follow OWASP and some of the security communities, we're screaming loud and clear where the holes are. But it's hard for businesses. There's no trodden path. We've now been doing governance in Power Platform for a number of years. There are things to copy. This whole AI model is new, and it's understanding how I can do it. So simple things to do. Ethics is new in IT. We've never been very ethical. We kind of make things happen and hope for the best. Now we've got to think about the ethics where the AI may disadvantage somebody or something because the model it was trained on isn't right. An example, in the land of banking, they are banned from autonomous AI because most of the models for finance, loans, mortgages were trained on 30 to 40-year-old white men. So women, people of color, people that are younger, people that are older are already disadvantaged the minute they start talking to the bot. So ethics is new. Am I allowed to copy art? No. Am I allowed to copy music? No. So this is a whole world that people are looking at the techies going, what's the ethical answer? And they go, I don't know. I've never been ethical in my life. I'm a techie. So we've got this new piece to think about. Coming back to the technical side with the AI, do you know where the models are stored? Where are the questions and answers stored? Because having spent the last 2 years going over, working out where every damn copilot's stored, let me tell you, they're in a myriad of places. Who can access them? Because when you've made your bot or your agent, you've created an audience. But if they're stored in SharePoint, all the answers and questions, Who can see the questions and answers to build something else from them? Are you now exposing data that you didn't think you were? So there's a whole new raft of fun to work out. Extensibility using pro code, APIs, multi-agent, multi-vendor agents. This is just sending poor old IT admins into a tailspin because the tools aren't there to do it. How do I know whether the data in Salesforce coming to Microsoft is protected when the agents are talking to each other? Honest truth, nobody really knows because it's so new. But we need to know what we know so we can assess the risks with what we know today. But back to that, how do we support, manage, and monitor? I'll come into some of the AI parts in a minute. Automation is sometimes a better answer. I've lost count of how many clients going, oh, I want to agentify this thing. Okay, tell me what you want to do. That's just automation. What's the AI for? Okay, so you can get budget by calling it AI. It's just Power Automate or RPA. There's no AI. So it's being honest in this discovery as we move forward. What really needs AI brain power to decide things, to research things, to find things? Let's be honest, we're all working this out together. Microsoft, Salesforce, SAP, they don't know any better than we do. We're all figuring this mess out together. Next one is who controls what. Just like we could decide who builds the Power Apps and who builds what in what environment, we can kind of think of the AI the same way, but it's harder to control because we've got M365 and its family of baby co-pilots, Copilot Chat, which can talk to pretty much anything. Then we've got Copilot Studio, which everybody thinks they own. Then we've got other AI that the data teams may be using elsewhere, Copilot for Power BI, Copilot for Fabric. Then we've got Copilot for Security, that is AI monitoring security. Scary. So there's all these things happening. Can you truly define who can control it? In the Microsoft world, mostly. If you start to talk multi-vendor, not so much. It's going to have to start at the moment with vendor controlling itself. When we play SAP and Microsoft, SAP and Salesforce agents together, there are so many unknowns. We're working on it with the vendors, with OWASP, with security communities. The answer is nobody truly knows, but we know what we should be looking for. And then how many businesses are actually ready? How many businesses' data is clean and secured enough to really run wildfire with AI? I've not met one yet today. One of my favorite gags with clients when we play with Copilot Studio is I'll point it at a whole raft of their SharePoint. And then I'll type in something like pay or CEO or CTO and see what comes up. And it's funny how many times I get the CEO's pay. Should that be public? Probably not. It's the fact that they've never secured their SharePoint properly. They've secured by having so many damn sites they don't think anyone can find it. The fact that the right data tagging's not on there. If we're reading Oracle, SQL, Fabric, SAP, is it secured properly or has it just been done by the fact they figure nobody can work it out? AI is all seeing. It will find that data. So one of the first questions in governing the AI is not the AI. You're back to the people. What data do you want this thing to look at? Are you happy that that's all secured and tagged? Are you sure? Okay, if we build on this, are you going to be comfortable if I share this across the business? Are you sure? You've got to go through the steps. Now, we all want to play. We all need to be playing with AI because otherwise we and our businesses will be left behind. I'm not trying to scaremonger completely. I'm trying to make people think. When Power Apps first came out, there was, it's going to share data it shouldn't. As long as we were sensible, it didn't do too bad. The AI can, if depending on how we connect it to the data, share anything if we haven't protected the data sources in the first place. So there is prep work to do. Something I'm often asked when I'm doing AI sessions is, can we have one AI to rule them all? God forbid. There are so many risks in there that I don't even know where to start. I had a client that said, oh, all the security decisions and all the decisions on what roles and sort of security groups people get, we're letting AI do that now. I'm like, are you sure? Do you want to do that? If I hack into the AI, do you know what I can do with that? Will we get to the point there is one AI to rule them all? I think we're a huge long way from there. What we have got at the moment is the security AI from Microsoft is getting better, and it can guide us, maybe give us suggestions. Is it going to take over as an admin anytime soon? No. And if your business is trying to make it, it is not ready for it. It does not understand the hackers, the stupid, and the malicious. So we need to keep the human in the loop. Doesn't mean we can't use AI to help, but we're not letting it loose on its own yet. So what kind of tools and knowledge do we want? We've kind of got a mixture some of you are familiar with, and the slides, Sarah's got the slides if you want to click on any of the links. So the admin center for both Power Platform and Power BI, you already kind of know they're there. They have both got Copilot pieces. If you've not played with the Power Platform Admin Center and the new Copilot hub in it, go and have a look. Haven't got time to demo it in this session today, but it's got some fairly good monitoring pieces. Not perfect by any means, but this is new. The COE kit, which has been around forever, it's got some Copilot-y things. It's got obviously the Power Platform things. More and more of the new Power Platform Admin Center is taking what we loved and lived in the COE kit into Power Platform, and the COE kit is working on the next generation. The Copilot Studio Hub, as I mentioned, that's in the Admin Center, there's a link directly to it for you to read if you've not gone and explored it yet. You may not have access to the Admin Center, but you can at least go and understand all the goodness that now brings. M365 Copilot is managed in M365. Now, whether that's Word, Excel, SharePoint agents, or M365 Copilot itself, and 98% of Copilot chat is managed in there. There are some bits in Copilot chat, which is the web Bing version, that are managed in Azure. But most of what you need for M365 is controlled there, including access, stopping people publishing, and deciding what they can connect to. For Microsoft Purview, for those of you who don't know about it, it was what we used to call the old Security and Compliance Center in M365. It then, Microsoft bought the tool Purview and put it in Azure to monitor things like SQL and Oracle. It's now been merged into one big yummy hub, which does all sorts of cool monitoring and checking of things. It can monitor and manage the data and read the data tagging. So when we want to look at how we secure this stuff, Copilot Studio, M365 Copilot, can be forced to read the tags out of SharePoint. So what's secret, private, public? What have we tagged in Dataverse? Now you'll say, I don't tag my data in Dataverse. Well, you should be, because that's what Purview does. If your data is tagged in an Azure Blob, a data lake, in Synapse, SQL, Fabric, and SAP, Purview can read a lot of it. It can certainly read SAP HANA. So we can see the data tagging, that this is super secret squirrel, and it won't let you use it. We can even block bots being published if you try to use secret squirrel data. There are lots of rules in there. This session isn't long enough. I do a whole different session on Copilot Studio and M365 Copilot Purview. But if you've not looked at it to see what it can do, there's a nice link to the site, and you've got some Microsoft Learn things too. But Purview is the Microsoft answer to that govern, monitor, manage. Next question I get is, where the hell do I start? If you are new to the land of governance, or maybe you've kind of got low code-ish sorted, but now you need to start working on AI, you can't do it all at once. Pick a single thing you want to start on. So I'm going to start with M365 Copilot. What are we trying to do with it? What are the risks if it's just in Office? Surely there's not much risk there. Yeah, well, there are risks. So go and look at them and understand them. How do I mitigate them? We've got some great tools. We can always do analytics to see what's happening. Whatever rules you implement, communicate them. Do not leave people to figure it out. I know you're blocking me. You're not telling me what you're doing. Communicate it. Find the right channels, or go and talk to people and say, this is what's coming. Be fair. Be clear what you're trying to do, but review it, because we know Microsoft launches something new every damn week. It's almost impossible to stay on top of it. Review what you've decided as the risks and mitigations at least once a month with AI. You can probably do it once every 2 or 3 months with Power Platform, give or take a few weird releases. But AI, you leave it longer than a month and it's off, and it's made its own life, and it's making its own sandwiches. The biggest thing I tell businesses, it takes a parliament to govern. You cannot do it by yourself. It needs IT, it needs the business, and it needs the security, cyber, whoever you want to call them. You are a parliament to govern, not a one ring to rule them all. Final things to think about. Governance never stops still, and with AI, it's going to constantly move as everyone is trying to push the AI agenda, both from a vendor, suppliers, extra little weird AI, download a thingy today. You're going to get left behind. You've got to really have somebody focusing on everything that's changing. We used to say, oh, one person can just about run Power Platform as an admin. Governance now with AI, it needs complete focus. We cannot ignore it anymore. Do not underestimate the risk of data loss. I can't say it enough, because I've seen some horrible disaster stories where businesses have either gone bankrupt or ended up in so much debt from the most stupid things. Recognize every barrier you put in, some bright spark's going to find at least 3 ways around it. This is why we constantly evaluate it, monitor it, look at what they're doing. And if you can't beat them, join them, kidnap them into your team to help work out how to govern. Don't make them your enemy. At the end of the day, people just want to do their jobs. They're trying to find the easiest path. So try to help find the easiest path, and try not to be a blocker, but where you have to be fair. AI is just confusing. Every IT admin on the planet, everybody who thinks about governance, they just don't know where to start. There's not enough documentation. It's not really that different. It's understanding where it sticks all its stuff. Copilot is abysmal at sticking stuff everywhere. But once you've got that understood, you can treat it like you would low code. Businesses do not care about IT budgets apart from the IT department. So having that argument about why you want to license it or cross-charge it is really hard. It's about helping them understand the risks and the costs, but also the value you're going to bring them. By spending that little bit more on a proper license, look at all the things we can do. IT has forever been seen as the barrier. We're always going to be the baddies. So how can we help break that down? The biggest way to that is listen. You can't always solve it. You can't always be Mr. Nice Guy, but at least listen and think about it. And however hard you rule or govern is down to your business and regulations, but think what it's like to be the human being. You are not their God, you are not their king, you are there to help them. And that's it. Hope you've enjoyed that.